Hi guys, I'm Daniel and I'm a cyclist currently living in China. In this video I want to talk about color grading the Insta360 X5 footage. One thing that no sponsored video from Insta360 talked about was the fact that the X5 now has I-Log, which is a flat color profile, flatter than the flat, that gives you more leeway to color grade your footage. And I want to show you guys my process for color grading the footage in this video. I've got some interval efforts to do. I'll use that footage in the edit to show you guys my process and the different picture profiles that Insta360 provides and the LUT that they provide for grading the I-Log footage. Versus what I can achieve in DaVinci Resolve. You have to downscale the footage from 8K to 5.7K to shoot in I-Log. So that usually comes across as a negative when people hear that. And it's probably not what Insta360 wanted to lead their marketing with. Fair. For me, that's not too big of a problem. I prefer 8K because I like to punch in on the footage a little bit so you don't have as much of that warpy, wonky, Gumby looking 360 footage. I'm not about that. I don't really care for that look. I like more of a flat to wide standard look. And having the extra resolution when punching in would be nice. But 5.7K, you get smaller file sizes, less battery usage. For me out on the bike doing these vlogs, that's a perfect combination. So it's usable. Most of the users out there with this camera are not going to color grade their footage. I mean, let's be honest, most people just use a natural or even vivid color profile and run with that, throw it on social media, and it's good. You know, it's pretty good. And that's great. I usually use a Blackmagic cinema camera, shooting in 12-bit color raw footage. So I color grade my footage all the time. It's a requirement. I've spent hundreds of hours learning how to color grade my footage, trying to dial it in and get the best workflow possible. Mostly watching other YouTube videos and a heck of a lot of trial and error. So I know what I'm talking about to an extent, but I'm not a pro colorist, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But I'm going to show you my process, and you can copy the process and see what results you get. I think these sponsored videos, I'm really disappointed by them. I'm disappointed by Insta360 in some regards, because, you know, they paid someone like Peter McKinnon, right, who's known for his stylized look. He's very particular about his look of his videos. And they didn't let him talk about the color grade at all. The fact that there's I-Log even at all. It's a real miss. It's another tool to use as a creator to convey the story, to convey the vibe. And it's just completely being overlooked. So I'm gonna go do my intervals coming up here, and I'll see you guys in the edit. Done and dusted.
Okay, we're back from the intervals, and man, those were really grueling. I thought I was gonna die today.
But let's jump in to the edit here and show you how I get this color grade. The first thing I want to start with is actually over in the Insta360 Studio for bringing in the footage from the X5 to the studio so you can do your keyframing, and then you're going to have to export that into your editor, which I use DaVinci Resolve. So when you come in and you bring this into the studio, I suggest actually making a project and opening up the footage in there, because if the application crashes, your keyframes will be saved in a project. And I've had some issues where if you upload it in the media tab and try to export just like one clip, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I highly recommend actually just doing it all in the project. So right now we're looking at the I-Log footage. It's quite flat. Take a look at that in full screen here, and you can see it's very, very flat. And we can actually view this with their own LUT, and which is in the image tab there. And you can see they add a lot of vibrance in, way too much for my taste. And so I'm not going to use that. But for some people that might be enough. Make sure you have that off though when you go to export, and we want to make sure we're getting the best settings in the export. So best quality, so 4K, everything's 4K unless you're uploading to social media. You can down scale that a little bit. And then I'm using ProRes 422. If you use H.265 or 264, I think you can drop the bitrate down to like 130, because if you look at the metadata in the clip itself, I think the bitrate is actually only 130. At least that's what I was seeing when filming in 5.7K with I-Log. Maybe that's different in the 8K, but you don't really need to bump it all the way up there if you want a smaller size. So like under 3 gigs for this clip, which I think this clip is like 18 minutes long or something like that. And then ProRes 422 is, you don't have to deal with bitrate. It's just going to max that out anyway. That's going to be around 12.5 gigs. So pretty hefty, but storage space isn't really a problem for me. It's just the time in exporting that sometimes can be quite annoying. So, okay, let's go over to DaVinci Resolve. Okay, so first thing over in DaVinci Resolve here, I want to show you what the 3 standard profiles in the X5 color-wise look like. We've got standard, vivid, and flat. So if we go ahead and play through these guys here, you can see what the camera, straight out of camera, looks like. All right, we're now shooting in 8K, no HDR, standard color profile on a gloomy overcast day. So this is how this looks. Now we're shooting in 8K, no HDR, vivid, and this is how this looks. And now we're shooting an 8K, no HDR, flat color profile. This is how this looks. And here's a comparison with all 3 side by side for you to take a look at, see if there's one that you prefer over another. When I look at this, the first thing that pops out at me is that the standard looks all right. It's got a little bit heavy on the greens, I feel like. The vivid is quite heavy on the greens. I wouldn't use that. This looks like your standard action cam footage. And the flat actually might be a good place to start with if you just want to add a little bit more contrast or a little bit more saturation. You don't want to fuff too much with a color grade. But if you're like me, you want a unique look or want your footage to look a little bit better than what you're getting. So let's go over to the color page and actually see how I put together my grade. So first thing to note is don't get overwhelmed by all of these nodes. DaVinci Resolve uses a node-based system for color grading, and these nodes just help me piece out every little piece of the color grade if I were to build something really unique from scratch. We're not using all these, we're only going to use about 7 of them. So I'm just going to walk you through. I'm not going to build it from scratch. I've already built the color grade, and I'm just going to show you what my settings are. So first off, we're going to do a color space transform. And this color space transform brings us from the X5 Rec 709 into a bigger color space. I like using DaVinci Resolve's color space, which uses DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate, because I have a Blackmagic camera and that's what I'm used to working with. And then we're also going to go out into Rec 709 from DaVinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate into 709 and Gamma 2.2, which is better for YouTube and the web. So everything in between these two nodes here is going to be our grade. We're going to start by adding some contrast. So we start getting a little less flat. So I bumped this up from 1 to 1.136. And then I added in a little bit of saturation. Not a whole lot. I went up from 50 to 55 here at the bottom. Start adding a little bit more of a less flat color to it. Then we're going to turn on the curves, and basically this is your standard kind of S-shaped curve. Nothing too dramatic here though, just bumping the shadows down a little, bringing the highlights up a little bit. And we can see what that does to the image. Now we're starting to get out of that flat, and this is actually starting to look pretty decent. If anything, this is starting to look a little bit like Insta360's flat image, with maybe just a bit more saturation to it. All right, and then this is where I'd say the secret sauce comes into play. So DaVinci Resolve has this feature called Film Look Creator, and I believe it's all on the free version. There might be a couple settings in here for the film specific stuff, like grain, that might be a paid version. I have the paid version. So if something isn't free here, you can let me know in the comments, but I think most of it here is free to use. So I chose to use a custom preset. I brought the effects blend down a little bit, and I went with the Rochester core look, and this is the main piece here. So Rochester is kind of their nod to Kodak. This other one here is a nod to Fujifilm, and then you've got a couple of others to play with. But I like the Rochester one. I think it's the best color balance. I just like it. I think I brought the contrast to 1. It's usually at like 1.2. And then I adjusted the white balance a little bit because there was a little bit discrepancy between what I thought the white balance should be and the tint. There was too much pink in the image, so I put a little bit more green back into the image here. I brought up the saturation, the subtractive saturation, which works in a little bit more of a log format. It's not all or nothing, so you can go, kind of black and white look or not. And then just a little bit of richness. You don't want to go too high in the richness because you'll see the yellow line here. If we bring that up, it's going to turn orange. And that's the thing with 8-bit color footage, is we don't have a lot of information or the colors to work with, so we have to be conscious not to overdo things. And then what really sets this apart is going to be this split tone. So if I turn that off, you can see we're quite cool and kind of underwhelming of an image. Turn that back on, and we've got some, decent look going on here, I think. And that's giving you that orange and teal type of a look. You can do other combinations as well, but this is how I kind of set more of an orange teal type look to this image. I didn't do any vignette. I did, however, do halation and bloom. So I like a little bit of more of a film type look to my footage without getting too grainy. And so halation and bloom, having those on, but again, just being careful of how much we're doing. In the future, I might go a little bit more heavy as I play with the footage a little bit, but for now, this was good. And then the grain, I don't have any grain on here right now. I usually add grain, flicker, and gate weave to my footage to give a little bit of texture and movement to the footage, especially on static shots. But with 360 footage, I'm moving the camera. I mean, if we watch this clip here briefly, I'm moving the camera around quite a bit as we are descending this climb here. And so I feel like there's already enough movement, and adding anything more to the image might just be too distracting. It's one of those things where you want the film quality to, that film look to be there, but then to kind of go subconscious and not be something that's noticed. Yeah, I feel like if I add in too much grain or film vibe to it, we're gonna be taking away from the functionality of the 360 footage. And then the last little bit here that I did was this film gate, which I did a 2.4 to 1. So this is a 2.35 to 1 ratio aspect that I exported from the Studio, Insta360 Studio. Reason being is I usually like 4x3 for action cam type stuff, but it gets really warpy with the 360 camera for some reason. And 9x16 for vertical stuff looks really good. Not a lot of warp to it. 16:9 is pretty decent, but I noticed still a little bit of warpness to it, and when I took it a little wider and didn't allow as much headroom to the footage, there was less warpness. I was able to control it a little bit better at least. So I prefer that, and I uploaded a test image to YouTube and checked it out on the phone. And if you get rid of this film gate, it goes off the corners of the phone anyway. The phone has rounded corners. So I think by leaving those on is perfectly fine. You're not actually losing any footage. And I think it just kind of like gives it just that little extra of something where you're aware that what you're watching isn't just something that was slapped together. And that's kind of what I'm going for, is I've taken time to curate both the stories that I'm telling on the bike routes that I'm doing, and then crafting the edit afterwards so that it's a enjoyable experience as a viewer and for me to edit and create. So without that, it just felt like it was missing something. And then, of course, we're going back out into the Rec 709. Everything else after is not doing anything with. The only other thing is with these 360 images, you'll notice there's a lot of movement here. I'm moving pretty quick, but if I freeze the frame, everything is sharp and clear. There's no sense of movement. And that's because we're not using ND filters in these 360 cameras. I don't think there is an ND filter for a 360 camera. And if you use ND filter with some action cameras, you can have issues with the stabilization of the footage. How you can get around that and add some movement back in on the side and give that sense of speed is to add motion blur back in. So I've grouped together all my on-bike videos, and if we go over to the post clip, so the post grade of the group, I have motion blur set, and if we turn that on, the test clip I'm going to show you here is actually at about 16. So if we turn that on and I disable that, you can see now the motion blur, and this is too strong. I'm going to dial it back for when I export this to YouTube. But it's a good example, and let me show you what that actually looks like. Okay, so here's a clip of the downhill. And if we freeze the frame, we can see that we have motion. Now I'll just play it in a few seconds here and let you decide if this is too much motion blur. I think it's okay, but the problem is when you start moving the camera around to go from like this front facing view to maybe a side view or looking back at me type of a view, you can get just a little bit too much of that motion blur in between those movements. So like this right here, that felt a little bit too much motion blur to me there. And so you can just dial it down. You don't need a lot. Less is more in this case. So yeah, that's how I color graded the Insta360 X5 footage, and how I wish more people would color grade it and handle their footage and do a little bit less of the super wonky, warpy stuff. Every now and again, it's kind of fun to see something like that, but most of us want to see the surrounding. We don't want to see, this like globe type image and not be able to see everything. At least that's my personal opinion. I'm going to have a video coming out very shortly on my first impressions of the camera. I took the camera down to Tianjin for a cycling trip, and then I'm going to have a full Insta360 X5 review video that I'll do in probably about a month's time after I've filmed a couple of cycling vlogs and stuff like that, which I try to do. I was doing a couple times a week. I'm trying to do them on a weekly basis here. So go ahead and subscribe, follow along if you guys want to see more of this content, see more of China, and yeah, catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace. Thank you.